So today is the fourth day of the main portion of the 35th Kaji Manlam. And it is also the final day of the teaching on Geshe Potowa's long soliloquy. So first of all, I would like to offer my heartfelt greetings to the Gyalwa Gyaltsab, the Regent of the Buddhas, Goshri Gyaltsab Rinpoche, the Mingyur Rinpoche, as well as all of the other lamas, tulkus, all of the khenpas and geshes, to all of the monks and nuns from the all the monks and nuns attending, as well as all the faithful lay devotees who have come from all over the world. So I will continue from where we left off the text yesterday. Here it says, the verse, I've gained what is most difficult to get, the leisures and resources that benefit beings. If I do not accomplish good in this, how will I ever come to them again? This verse should be enough but on its own, but no one realizes that. They don't even seek the Dharma. They hope from the merit of the Dharma from their knowledge of the profane. That is profoundly mistaken, but they do not understand. They deserve sympathy. If you do not turn your mind away from this life, your fear of being badly off in old age will prevent you from being generous. Even to keep discipline, you must have no desires. But fearing being badly off in old age breeds desire. Therefore, without eliminating desires for this life, you will not perfect the accumulation. So it is important to give up on this life. It is important to give up on this life. It is important to give up on this life, I say 3 times. This contains all the crucial points of the Dharma. This is how you should distinguish samsara and nirvana. All lasting ambitions begin with this. This suppresses all faults. The foundations of all joy and goodness must be laid on this. It is crucially important to abandon all thoughts of this life. You have no choice if you do not. They are what get you into all suffering, so you must eliminate them in whatever way you can. And so here it says the verse, I've gained what is most difficult to get. This is from the way of the Bodhisattva. I've gained what is most difficult to get, the leisures and resources that benefit beings. If I do not accomplish good in this, how will I ever come to them again? So there's a stanza, right? When we say, this stanza, I've gained what is most difficult to get. And when we say that this should be enough on its own, what that means is that if we only listen to, contemplate, and meditate upon this verse, that alone is enough. Or if you're someone who practices it, there's nothing wrong with only doing that verse. However, no one knows this crucial point of the leisures and resources of the precious human body. For example, when we teach the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, we give instruction on death and impermanence, the precious human body, karmic cause and effect, and the defects of samsara. We teach all 4 of these, but when we teach them, even though these preliminary dharmas are like the foundation, we don't give them much importance. Many people don't know they are crucial, but when we talk about Mahamudra and Dzogchen, everyone thinks that those are what are really important and significant. But in actuality, it's as said, the preliminaries are more important than the main practice. If we cannot lay a good foundation with the preliminary dharmas, it will be difficult for the dharma of the main practice to bring great benefit to your mind. As the Kadampa masters of the past said, if you do not develop the realization of death and impermanence in your being, Guhya Samaja will not be profound. But if you do develop death and impermanence in your being, the 3 lines of refuge are profound. So if we do not develop the preliminary dharmas, such as the meditation on death and impermanence within our beings, Guhya Samaja is not profound. Saying it is not profound is not to talk about it in terms of its own sake, about whether it's profound or not on its own sake. The question is whether it will be profound or not, beneficial or not, in the being of the individual who is practicing it. If someone does not develop death and impermanence in their being, the dharmas we say are profound will not be of any great benefit to them. But if an individual realizes death and impermanence and the rest in their being, then even if they only know the 3 lines of going for refuge, that alone will bring a great benefit within their mind stream of that individual. The text says, they don't even seek the Dharma. They hope for the merit of the Dharma from their knowledge of the profane. So what this says is that all practitioners seek merit, but they don't seek the Dharma. And here, in this context, merit means human merit. And so human merit here means when becoming well-known or becoming prosperous, it's the merit, the prosperity, the wealth, and abundance of this life. And so therefore, seeking merit and seeking the Dharma are contrary to each other. Seeking worldly merit and seeking the true Dharma do not mesh. This is because one is seeking good in this life and the other is seeking good in future lives. And for this reason, they are contradictory of each other. They oppose each other. For example, if in your mind you harbor the clinging, you could say, or the great desire of wondering whether you'll be prosperous in this life or have abundance in this life, then it will be difficult for us to gather the accumulations and purify the obscurations well. The point that gathering the accumulations and purifying the obscurations comes down to is that usually when we talk about the 2 accumulations, they're the accumulations of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. But before we can perfect the accumulation of wisdom, we first must perfect the accumulation of merit. And in order to perfect the accumulation of merit, we need to put the 8 worldly concerns of this life completely out of mind. We must give up on the 8 worldly concerns of this life, or to the mind that clings to goodness and prosperity in this life. We must not be attached to any of the good things of this life. And then from the time that we develop a pure mind of non-attachment, whichever of the 10 transcendences we might train in, we might be able to gain some freedom in it, or gain some control or independence in our practice. So Pottowa says, it is important to give up on this life, I say 3 times. He says, Pottowa says, it is important to give up on this life. It is important to give up on this life. It is important to give up on this life, Pottowa says 3 times. In brief, the critical point of all Dharma practice is contained in this. The distinction between samsara and nirvana is drawn by this. Whether we're practicing profane or sacred Dharma, profane worldly Dharma or the sacred true Dharma, is determined only by this. And all of our wishes for lasting benefit must be found through this. And so if we go down this path, you could say going down this path, or if you could say it works out, then this will overcome all our faults and wrongs. This will lay the foundation for all happiness and goodness, the basis for all happiness and goodness. And for this reason, Pottowa, no matter how many times he thinks about it, no matter how much he mulls it over, says that if we do not give up on this life, we are not a true Dharma practitioner. If we can give up on this life, then then our minds will not engage in worldly things like gaining popularity or fame or possessions and so forth. We'll have no wish to think of them. We'll feel revolted by them. And so for this reason, when that occurs, we'll develop a great interest in our future lives. And this is a really crucially important point, he says. This is absolutely crucial, he says. Now the text then continues, before we start to practice Dharma, none of us practitioners have much attachment to wealth and things, and we seldom yearn for those close to us. We do not want to pay attention to work or tasks, but once someone enters the Dharma, they make profane ambitions the most important. They show up for the detailed work, and when it's time to be stingy. Even if they cannot do anything else, they spread the word, speak badly, and bear bad omens. At the very least, they act as the messenger. They go into excessive detail on their possessions, and when doing business, they will go to a degree to make it too difficult for anyone else. When made to practice the Dharma, what they think of is riches. They only do what they are not made to. This, too, is because of not remembering death. If you practice Dharma properly, your enemies will all be dear to you. It will make all those close to you feel good. All the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will grant their blessings to that. This satisfies the wishes of all the gurus and spiritual friends. The gods and Dharma protectors will fulfill all your ambitions, and all your intentions will be accomplished as you wish. Therefore, understand that your mind becoming your Dharma alone is the most crucial point. You must know how to bring all the Buddha's words and classes of scripture to bear upon your own mind. For example, it's like these days, if you have two siblings, so one of them enters the gates of Dharma and takes monastic vows, the other doesn't and does worldly work instead. But the one who became a monastic and lives in the monastery, what they do is they say, they become the one who makes profound ambitions, who makes the most worldly plans for this life, and the one who always gives the most advice and help. They show up everywhere. If there's some worldly task that you need to go into detail, you say, you can go this, you should give them this much, you should give them that thing, but not that. You should give this or that. They always show up for that. Even if they don't know how to do anything else, at the very least, they'll pass messages and so forth back and forth about the work or about news. And if someone needs to be sent as like a representative, someone to make a connection, to make a contact and so forth, it's always them who are the one who are to do it. And in this way, the monastic sibling ends up knowing more about worldly affairs than the one who stayed at home, than the one who's a householder. Likewise, they're also the more eager and the more detailed about the worldly affairs. And the reason this happens is because they haven't contemplated death. So for this reason, if we do not contemplate death, even if we have the image of a practitioner, in actuality we're not, and there is the danger that we'll be even more worldly than worldly people. As in brief, if we are able to practice true Dharma, even our enemies, like our real antagonists, people who dislike us from the core of their beings, the true enemies, even they will begin to think, oh, that's a real Dharma practitioner. They'll think, oh, that's a really good person. And even they, in their own minds, will begin to see us as an agreeable person. It's like Milarepa, for example. Milarepa did sorcery and killing his aunt and uncle's children and many relatives. But in the very end of it all, his aunt came to the thought, oh, Milarepa really is a true Dharma practitioner. He's actually a good person. And so then she came to meet Milarepa. So such situations can happen, right? Likewise, the text says, it will make all of those close to you feel good. With all your friends and relatives, it will be difficult to satisfy them in worldly terms. It's hard to make them feel satisfied in worldly ways, but if in terms of the Dharma we can actually do our Dharma practice well, there's a hope that we can at least truly satisfy them through the Dharma. The text reads, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas grant their blessings to that. This is saying that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas will grant their blessings to those who practice such pure Dharma. The text continues, this satisfies the wishes of all the gurus and spiritual friends. This will fulfill the wishes of your gurus and spiritual friends. Practicing the Dharma purely fulfills their intentions. If we practice Dharma, it fulfills the wishes and the intentions of the gurus and spiritual friends, and it pleases them. The text reads, the gods and Dharma protectors will fulfill all your ambitions. Whatever task or activity you are doing, the gods and Dharma protectors will help you, aiding you by accomplishing activity, and your intentions will be fulfilled as you wish. But not understanding how fine and good this is, many people, even those who are called by the name Dharma practitioners, only do worldly things. They do not give up on the world and do not find confidence in or entrust themselves fully from the depths of their being to the true Dharma. And this is the reason why they end up only doing worldly things. So in brief, for minds to become the Dharma, it's like as said in the four Dharmas of Gampoa, may my mind become the Dharma. In order for our minds to become the Dharma, we must develop a realization of death and impermanence in our beings. Likewise, we must be revolted by this life. If this can happen, only then will our minds become the Dharma. And what this point comes down to is that usually when talking about the paths of the three types of individuals, we talk about the path of the lesser type of individual. The lesser type of individual means someone who seeks the pleasures of the higher realms in the next life. This is the lesser type of individual. This means that they must seek the higher realms and fear the lower realms. So for that reason, at the very least, we absolutely must be someone who thinks about the next and future lives. And if that occurs, only then can we be included or counted as a Dharma practitioner. And what this comes down to is that our mind should be free of any clinging to this life. In any case, we should be someone who feels that it is important to do something for the sake of our next lifetime. And if we don't think that, then our mind will not become the Dharma. And that is the reason why. So now please look at the text. Those who are currently the equals or superiors of their peers, who are eminent and well-known, may seem prominent now, but they too will definitely die. When they die, there will be a difference. To bring it together and wrap it up, we must have no regrets at the time of death. When we are stricken with a fatal illness and know we will not escape, it is too late to say, I am not destined to die like this. I have something better to do than this. If this old ghost doesn't die, I will generally practice the Dharma. Therefore, stoking the fires of desire now is no help. We are wandering in samsara, but have the opportunity to awaken to Buddhahood. This brief life will definitely run out. Therefore, we must give up on this life and genuinely practice the Dharma. The basic meaning is that we Dharma practitioners should have no regret at the time of death. At the time of death, we should be able to think that this human life has been meaningful. We need to think it has a point. We should be free of regrets. Otherwise, when we're stricken by a fatal illness, we've come down with a fatal illness, and we know that there's no escape and no cure, then at that time we'll think, oh, if I just don't die now. Now we finally have some thought about it and found some confidence, and we think about it, we look back and we think, oh, if I just could have done a little bit better than I did, it hasn't worked out at all. So if I don't die now, I'll really practice the Dharma well. And so we'll think that. And when we feel such intense regret, it's already too late. It's just too late. So for that reason, and for right now, while we have the opportunity to accomplish it, whether it be Buddhahood or whether it be samsara, we have an opportunity. And at this time, when we do have the opportunity, we need to apply ourselves. We must not waste this. We must not waste time. We have to try out this opportunity and practice the Dharma. We have to give meaning to this human life, he's saying. So, death and impermanence. So death and impermanence comes up over and over again in Potowa's writings. And so Potowa himself was someone who only practiced death and impermanence. It's like death and impermanence became his avocation or profession, because he realized death and impermanence within himself. He knew very well the experience that it produced, the effect that it had within him. And he's teaching it to us exactly as he knew it himself. So as he teaches, if we ourselves can emulate Potowa and can follow training in his example, I think that we also can definitely experience the same feeling that he did and feel the same effect in our minds. So many people think that meditating on death and impermanence means saying, I'm going to die, I can't live forever. I can't live forever, I'm going to die. So they think it always means living in fear of death, being afraid of death. Many people think that that is what meditating on death and impermanence means. But actually, meditating on death and impermanence does not mean that. Meditating on impermanence means knowing it is certain we will die, but we do not know when we will die. Likewise, we don't know the circumstances of our death. For that reason, we need to take the opportunity, and now, while we are still breathing, we need to test this opportunity to accomplish whatever our main goal or aim is. And if we are able to do this, that is meditating on death and impermanence. It's not just, even animals will fear death. And so, merely having a fear of death is not really meditating on death and impermanence. It's not the meaning of the meditation. The main thing is that death and impermanence is that compound phenomena perish in every moment. They change in every moment. Our human life changes in every moment. And for that reason, in every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, we get a new chance. We're always getting new chances. And as we get each new chance, we must not let those opportunities go to waste. And so from one perspective, in the past and this life, we've had faults, we've made mistakes, we haven't fulfilled our wishes, but that's all the past. But now, a moment later, an hour later, we get a new chance. And because we do get a new chance, it is important that we clearly recognize that new opportunity and then use it to make ourselves into a new person and to give birth to a new human life. It is important for us to develop this new prajna and this new understanding. If we can do that, only then will we feel the great benefits or the great power that comes from meditating on death and impermanence. This is the reason why Geshe Patoa reminds us repeatedly that meditating on death and impermanence is important. And so we need to see how we can put what he taught into our lives, to see whether can we put it into practice. At the very least, we have to try. It's very important. If we can do this, then it's like he's advising us from the heart, like a parent to their child, heartfully, with great feeling. This advice he's giving is something we must not let go to waste, I think. Now in the text it reads, "Even though I do not think it will help anyone else, I could not help but say this to myself. If this was not from the heart, punish me." This is Guru Potoa's long soliloquy, the ultimate evidence of practicing the Dharma. This completes the teaching on Geshe Patoa's long soliloquy. Generally, the reason why it's called the long soliloquy is actually, it has a really important point. From one perspective, a soliloquy, when we say soliloquy, means when someone is talking to themselves, they're saying something to themselves. So here, Patoa himself is actually checking himself. He's examining himself. He's giving himself advice. He's checking himself, and over again, repeatedly, he's counseling himself. This is an example of someone continually checking themselves, speaking to themselves, and giving themselves advice. This is like an example he's giving us. From another perspective, it is Geshe Patoa saying that this is what he thinks. But even though he thinks that, no one's going to listen. Even if I tell them, they won't listen. Everyone only thinks about this life. There isn't even a single other person who thinks about future lives. Because there isn't anyone else, he thinks he had no alternative. And no point. I'm just going to sit here speaking to myself, that's what he's saying. So from this perspective, it's like he had nothing else to do. There are very few people who have any interest in developing the realization of death and impermanence in their hearts. And so for that reason, this illustrates how his own heart became very heavy, how he became depressed. So this long soliloquy is also found in the collected words of Lama Shang, and I saw it there. Now generally it's credited to Geshe Patoa, but in Lama Shang's collected works it says that Lama Shang wrote it. This is something we will have to research in the future. So what is the source or the basis for saying Lama Shang wrote it? It is generally accepted that Patoa wrote it, but I don't clearly know the reasons why it is said that Lama Shang wrote it. So that is something we need to... so this is something that we must investigate and research. In any case, whether the author was Lama Shang or Geshe Patoa, perhaps this is important from the perspective of historical research, but from the perspective of a Dharma practitioner, no matter who the author was, it was definitely written by a great being. The main thing, as it is said, is don't rely on the individual, rely on the Dharma. The topic is like completely compatible with the Dharma, you could say. It really condenses many critical points of the Dharma. These advice really strike the most important points. They get right at what is most critical. So it doesn't really matter who the author is. In any case, if you can practice it, then it's like that is enough. So for that reason, in this situation, I have not spoken all that much about the authorship of this text. So to sum it up, even though I am far away during this 35th Kagyu Munlam, I'm very happy that we could make a profound Dharma connection through modern technology. In particular, this is probably the third or fourth year that I have been teaching from the long soliloquy. So it is very good that I could complete the teaching this year. And I have a strong feeling that I have fulfilled a responsibility. And so for that reason, by the power of the virtue from this teaching, may all sentient beings throughout space progress down the path from happiness to happiness. May the precious teachings of the completely perfect Bhagavan Buddha flourish without ever waning. May the great beings who uphold the teachings, and in particular the Dalai Lama, who is like the eye and heart of all Tibetans, live long, and may all his activities be spontaneously fulfilled. May all great beings in all the Dharma lineages, as illustrated by the 4 great lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, may all these great beings live long and be harmonious. And in particular, may the teachings of the Tapo Kagyu flourish, and may the Karma Kamsao lineage founded by the glorious Dhamma Dusam Khyentpa thrive and flourish for a long time. May all the communities of the Sangha have pure discipline and be harmonious. In particular, may all sentient beings with whom we have connections be cared for lovingly and compassionately by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the short term as well as in the long term. May they swiftly achieve the state of liberation and omniscience. This is the dedication I am making, and I'd like to ask that all of you, the entire Sangha, offer your support and assistance by making the same aspiration. So actually tomorrow, in the next few days, on the last day, we have the special address. And I usually offer my opinions about some important points. I will not have too much more to say now. Once again, I'll take this opportunity this year, the Kyabje Gosri Gyaltsab Rinpoche gave a very profound and vast teaching on the aspiration for Mahamudra, and so wonderful teachings. I'd like to thank him from his heart. Likewise, Kyabje Mingyur Rinpoche also gave the great kindness of offering everyone instructions on meditation. And generally our Kagyus are people who primarily emphasize practice and meditation. And so Rinpoche himself gives us an excellent example of practice meditation. And he gives much advice to many other people as well. And his activities are spreading widely, and so I'd like to thank Rinpoche as well. Now, this Kagyu Munlam, among all the different virtues, the virtue in the beginning, the middle, and in the end, I hope that all of these activities are well completed. Thank you very much.